the situation in Germany and Europe. The political situation in Germany is more and more defined by the legislation and directives of the European Union. There's a very strong pressure to dissolve the national identity of the member states and create a united European state. Germany under Chancellor Merkel and France under President Macron are at the front of this fundamental change. The European Union uses its power to implement the gender agenda in every nation. LGBTIQ and anti-discrimination laws, also called equality laws because it sounds better, have been passed in most member states of the European Union. Will they also be implemented in South Korea? Let me make a general remark about the concept of discrimination. Discrimen is the Latin word for distinction or difference. The human being endowed with free will must distinguish between right and wrong, good and evil, to handle his freedom in such a way as to succeed in his own life and sustain a free, democratic society. For the person who knows that he is answerable to God, this distinction between good and evil is essential for his eternal salvation. If he is forbidden by law to make this distinction, it has severe implications for this life and eternal life. Anti-discrimination laws will strangle religious freedom and impede parents, teachers, and pastors to pass on Christian values to the next generation. This is a common feature of all totalitarian regimes, whatever their ideology might be. What is new is that this is sold to the people as freedom, but in reality, it is the destruction of freedom in the name of freedom, as the subtitle of my book goes. Let us make a survey of the development of this new ideology of gender mainstreaming in Germany and Europe. The clarion call for gender mainstreaming was the 4th UN World Conference of Women in Beijing in the year 1995, where the so-called Beijing Platform of Action was passed, obligating all member states to implement women's equality and gender into their legislation. 4 years later, in 1999, the Amsterdam Treaty of the European Union introduced sexual orientation as a criterion for anti-discrimination. The public had no idea what was going on, and that this sexual orientation was the lever for far-reaching anti-discrimination policy. In 2003, Family Minister Ursula von der Leyen, she is now President of the European Commission, founded the Gender Competence Center with the task to, quote, support gender mainstreaming in all political areas, initiating research, assembling knowledge, and educating experts, end of quote. This is how you bring about social change in a society. Millions of euros were poured into the task from the European Union and the German government. In 2007, gender aspects were implemented in advanced education, meaning that teachers were now indoctrinated with gender ideology. Public education at all age levels, beginning in kindergarten, was geared towards teaching the acceptance of LGBTIQ lifestyles. Between 2010 and 2013, action plans against homophobia became part of national policy. The LGBT organizations were financed by the state to carry out these action plans. All this happened top-down. The media, whose function is to control power, more and more became part of the political system and supportive of the agenda. The ethos of journalism as an independent and truthful control of the ever more invasive state has largely vanished. Christians were fast asleep. They relied on the fact that around 60% of the population were members of the Christian churches, but they became more and more liberalized, adapting to the mainstream. 10 years ago, the Lutheran Church allowed gay and lesbian couples to lead their congregation as pastors. The intention was to adapt to the world in order to keep people in the church, but the result was the opposite. The people left the churches by the hundred thousands and turned their back to the Protestant and the Catholic churches. The LGBT lobby, supported and lavishly funded by the EU and the UN, by George Soros, by powerful NGOs, by most governments of the Western world, and the tsars of big tech, worked relentlessly to put the Yogyakarta principles into action. Adapting to the conditions of each culture, they work step by step with long-term strategy. In Germany in 2001, civil unions for homosexuals were legalized. Nobody was to worry, of course. They didn't want marriage. Just a few alleviations put into law step by the courts, who could always justify the revolutionary changes of law with the principle of non-discrimination and the so-called violation of human rights. It would be discriminating, so they argued, if only married couples had tax advantages. So same-sex couples were granted the same advantages in 2001, even 10 years backwards. It would be discriminating if they could not adopt children. So in 3 legal steps, they were granted full adoption rights. Just imagine what that means for a child who has lost his parents. It would be discriminating and a violation of human rights if they could not marry with all the privileges the state grants to the institution of marriage. For decades, the public has been exposed to the relentless mind pressure of the media and the entertainment industry to see the practice of homosexuality as just another expression of love, no matter how promiscuous their lifestyle is. One European state after the other legalized same-sex marriage. The United States did so under President Obama in 2015. In France, in 2013, millions of people were on the streets to protest against mariage pour tous, marriage for everyone. But it made no impression on socialist President Hollande. He pulled the law through. Germany followed up in 2017 with an ingenious political move of Chancellor Merkel in that year. Within 1 week, without any public broad discussion, same-sex marriage was legalized by law. In disregard of nature, in disregard of the age-old meaning of marriage, in disregard of the necessity of marriage and family for a viable society. Considering the power of the relentless public campaigning to overturn the meaning of marriage, one would expect that same-sex couples would flood to the registry offices to be formally married. But this did not happen. Well below 10% of same-sex couples make use of the legal institution of marriage, for which they fought so ardently. Having achieved the legislation of same-sex marriage, the LGBT lobby discovered a new discrimination. They couldn't have children. But married couples have the human right to have children, have they not? So now they demanded that same-sex couples can use the methods of artificial reproduction, even surrogate motherhood, to satisfy their desire for children. The missing genetic material can be bought, the uterus rented, the child becomes a commodity that one can buy. Does anyone think of the well-being of the children? Do children not have the fundamental human right to know their biological parents and be brought up by these parents, and that these parents have to take responsibility for their children? It seems that our society have lost the natural instinct to protect the weak and vulnerable, namely their own children. That means they have lost their instinct to build a viable future. As soon as same-sex marriage is forced into law, the battle for transgenderism starts. People who feel that they are in the wrong body want to have the legal possibility to change their sex voluntarily by taking in hormones all their life, or even by mutilating their bodies by surgical operations. To change the mind, that is to discover the psychological reasons for gender dysphoria, is forbidden by law. In Germany, homosexual Minister for Health Jens Spahn succeeded to pass a law that forbids any so-called conversion therapy. The principle that the client can define the aim of therapy was abandoned. The courts have to deal with ever new issues of discrimination. Transition measures must be paid by health insurance. Transgender persons must be addressed with the pronouns of their choice. Men who declare that they are women must be allowed to compete with women in sports. The worst outcome of the idea that the human being can change his or her gender is a new hype amongst adolescent girls to change their gender by puberty delaying hormones and even surgical operations. The case numbers are exploding by the thousands. I consider it a criminal act to allow teenagers who are not allowed to drive a car or to vote to make decisions that will seriously damage their health for life, make them dependent on drugs, and in many cases, infertile. Again, the lobby was extremely effective up to the highest German court. In 2017, the Constitutional Court of Germany ruled that besides male and female, a third category must be introduced, which they called diverse. The German parliament swiftly put that into law. So now the documents for civil status have three categories: male, female diverse. Vacancies in jobs must be advertised for male, female diverse. It would be discriminating if an entrepreneur or an institution did not accept a transgender person in their staff, let's say as the teacher of school children. The bulwark against the triumphs of the sexual revolution has been the Catholic Church. This bulwark has been weakened from the inside by adapting the radical message of the gospel to the mainstream, and by the scandal of sexual abuse of boys by priests, an abhorrent crime. Now the LGBTIQ lobby drives a campaign and demands from the church to bless same-sex unions. But can a priest bless a behavior that the Bible considers as sinful from beginning to end, from the Old Testament to the New Testament? The German Bishops' Conference is giving in and installed a 4-year process called the Synodal Path with the intention to change the moral teaching of the Church. For 2,000 years, the Church proclaimed that sex needs the protective vessel of a faithful marriage of man and woman in order to give children a safe place to grow up. Is this no more valid? Anybody who stands up for the fact that we are born either as man or as woman, for the life-sustaining institution of marriage and family, who opposes the sexualization of children in kindergarten and school, as it is promoted by the United Nations and European Union. Anybody who resists the sexual revolution has to face severe discrimination, lose their job, be dragged to the courts, be fined heavily, have their business ruined, be excluded from public discourse, be cancelled in the social media by YouTube, Facebook, Google, Amazon, be persecuted by a so-called shitstorm in the social media, be ostracized in their work environment, and maybe even in their family. A recent poll in Germany showed that only 45% of the population still believe that they can express their political convictions freely. Dear friends in South Korea, I'm coming to the end. You are fighting a truly important battle. You are fighting for a free, democratic society, for the freedom of religion, for the family, for the next generation, for the future of your nation. It seems that the powers of evil that implement a new totalitarianism and intend to destroy the family are on the winning side. The truth is, they have chosen a path of destruction which will turn against themselves. Marriage and family are the plan of God, who created man in his own image, as we read on the first page in the Bible. He called man and woman to become one flesh and cooperate with God in the procreation of man, endowed with an eternal soul. God will bless and protect men and women and children who are committed to fulfill God's plan of love for you and for me and for your country and for all humanity. However strong the evil forces seem, God, nature, and reason are stronger. Keep up the battle, be courageous, build healthy, stable marriages and family, Men, stand up to protect your family and your children. Go to the schools and do not allow that your children will be sexualized in kindergarten and school. You have the power of God on your side. May God bless you. May God give you strength, and you will certainly win this battle in the long run. Thank you very much for your attention. God bless South Korea.